I'm Jeff Ranke, Editorial Director of Manufacturing.net and Manufacturing Business Technology. Welcome to Security Breach. In this episode, we're going to dive into two recently detected vulnerabilities that could have a significant impact on the industrial sector, as they involve two companies with wide-reaching influence on manufacturers of all sizes. One involves the Siemens Automation License Manager and the potential threats a vulnerability poses for data security and its users. The second stems from a unique source, a Bosch assembly tool. More specifically, we're talking about a very popular nutrunner/pneumatic torque wrench that could potentially be exploited by hackers to create extortion campaigns by shutting down the tools. Here to discuss this security challenge is Andrea Palanca, a security researcher at Nozomi Networks. Hey, Andrea, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to Security Breach. We're really excited to kind of talk about a unique vulnerability here with Bosch. You know, we know it's about an assembly tool and some of the different potential things that hackers could do to exploit this vulnerability, but maybe you can kind of lay it out for us a little bit. Tell us what we know so far.
Okay. So first and foremost, thank you so much for this opportunity to be here. So regarding the research that you have done, so we as Nozomi Networks Labs have analyzed this Bosch Rexel Smart Nutrunner. It's a pneumatic torque wrench that is certified for safety critical tightenings and heavily used in automotive production lines. So basically, we discovered this device while we were investigating real-time locating systems, which is the research that we presented at Black Hat USA in 2022. We discovered that some of the vendors were offering these integrations with these tools, and so we decided to give it a look, and found a total of 25 vulnerabilities, of which 11 are high risk and 14 are medium risk. Not only that, basically many times we are always asked, okay, you found access to the tool, but what can you do actually with it? So we wanted to practically demonstrate what an attacker could have done at that point. So we proved it. We demonstrated with proof of concept exploits that an attacker could have implanted a ransomware on the device, which could be used to cause production line stoppages and potential large-scale financial losses to asset owners. And another exploitation that we have practically demonstrated is that a threat actor could have hijacked the tightening programs surreptitiously without even the operator being aware of that, while manipulating also the onboard display so that the tool would have applied a different torque value than the one that is shown on the display, causing undetectable damage to the product being assembled or making it unsafe to use.
That is incredible in terms of, number one, identifying those exploits and the potential opportunity, if you want to call it that, for hackers here. When you're talking about automotive assembly and all the different safety elements there, we've done stories and we've talked about it here, talking about Boeing and some of the issues they've had, understanding that's aviation versus automotive, but there's a parallel there. When we start talking about safety of transportation devices that we just count on and don't think a whole lot about. So I guess the next question there, has there been any proof of anybody trying to utilize this exploit to get at these tools?
No. So far, basically, we have Nozomi Networks have a telemetry system where we're able to monitor basically all the tracks that are happening in our customers' networks. And so far, we have not been aware of any actual attempt to exploit those vulnerabilities. But of course, we've just released this research. So
what about Bosch? Have they responded in any way, shape, or form? Are they issuing any kind of patch or offering any type of advice in terms of how to negate this vulnerability or these vulnerabilities?
Yes, of course. So first and foremost, I would like to thank Bosch Rexel for the cooperation that we have done. We've done a beautiful cooperation together along this disclosure process. So Bosch Rexel right now is still working on patches to patch all these vulnerabilities. Is committed to provide patches by the end of January, as far as I know. And in the meanwhile, has provided some mitigations to their customers. We also have provided some mitigations in the article that we have published in our website while waiting for the patch from Bosch Rexel.
Excellent. We'll definitely include a link to that in the description of this episode so everybody can get at that information as well. Andre, I think one of the biggest things that the industrial sector has gotten better at, and they've had to over the last 3 or 4 years, but we are getting better at learning from our mistakes when it comes to cybersecurity here. What do you think can be some of the biggest takeaways from this situation that we can apply going forward?
I think this is my personal opinion as a researcher. This is yet another confirmation that security is ubiquitous and no device, even drills, can be considered exempt from security requirements. This especially happens, let me say that happens a lot in the OT and IoT. In many cases, the security model of this device stands on obscurity. The fact that the device doesn't have consumer technologies, is not available to the general public, and as such, the perception is that it's difficult to exploit and it's not necessary to secure it as hard as the phone that we use every day, which is hilarious, let me say. This research is the perfect counterexample. I mean, not only in the end we were able to purchase this device through a third-party reseller, but also we were able to analyze it, reverse engineer it, and find very, very risky vulnerabilities. I mean, at this point, what if we were the bad guys? What if the drill crypt ransomware that we developed, let's say, as a proof of concept, as an exercise, was not only a proof of concept, but a fully fledged double extortion ransomware?
No, it is mind-blowing. And I mean, do you think does a situation like this, does this result just from the fact that the attack surface is getting so big? We've got more and more connected devices. We tend to think more about automation platforms and software and HMIs and things like that. And you mentioned mobile devices being another big thing on the plant floor. Man, how are we going to think about assembly tools as well? It seems like a very daunting task. And I guess, is there some steps or some best practices that you could share in terms of, getting all of that stuff as soon as you possibly can? I guess it just seems overwhelming at times.
Yeah. Well, personally, I don't think there is a secret recipe here. Security is and has always been a never-ending process. It's a process. It's not, let's say, a target that you reach once and you forget about it. It doesn't work like that. It's a process. So, actually, there is nothing. All the security, let's say, principles that we apply for IT also work here. So segment your networks, apply strong security access controls, expose only the services you need and only to authorized people, use strong password, train your personnel. None of these steps by itself is enough, but they are all vital to avoid that spread of ransomware or any other, let's say, nefarious activities that may happen. And even with the nutrunners from Bosch, the same rules apply. Actually, in our own mitigation, we exactly stated all those pieces of advice, because in the end, this is what actually works.
Gotcha. One of the things you said, Bosch is working on some patches and some things to solve these vulnerabilities. Again, a lot of these suppliers have gotten so much better in responding with these types of patches. We've talked about things with Siemens. We've talked about things with other large automation platforms, Rockwell, whoever it may be. Those patches, they'll create some issues in and of themselves in the operational technology environment because you got to shut stuff down in order to implement those patches. I wonder if you have any perspective there on maybe helping the audience deal with the fact that we have to apply them, but it also impacts production flow through and operational efficiency and all of those things. How do you balance that?
That's a very good question. The answer is very, very difficult. Let's say there's not an answer for everyone. In the end, I think that in my opinion, it's always a matter of risk in this case. It's not only the base score of the vulnerabilities per se, but also I would say the surrounding context of the vulnerable devices. So if your security posture is ideal, meaning that you have networks that are well segmented with well thought access controls, passwords are continuously changed and are strong, you regularly perform trainings and all stuff like that, you may, let's say, wait a bit for a more convenient moment when to apply the patch, because the risk for you is, let's say, contained. There's still a risk, but it's not too high.
Right.
If your security posture is less than ideal, I would probably schedule the patching at least of the high-risk vulnerabilities ASAP, because, I mean, considering these vulnerabilities, all an attacker needs to have to be in position to exploit them is just one access to your network. If just one of the employees uses a weak password and maybe hasn't even enabled two-factor authentication to access the company VPN, then it would be trivial. It would be actually trivial to exploit those issues. So this regarding the specific vulnerabilities. From a global perspective, that's again my personal opinion. I'm a great fan of over-the-air updates, so auto updates, and wish that many more devices would support them. After all, I mean, today, not only IT software, such as we are, of course, very, very accustomed with the auto update with our own browsers or with our own computer, but also our own cars are getting more and more auto updates. And cars are, let's say, the cousins of OT equipment. They're not super different. So I hope that, I mean, the strategy is working. It has proven to be robust enough, let's say, for production. So probably I hope that this strategy gets adopted by more and more manufacturers of OT and IoT devices, because it has proven to dramatically decrease the downtime and the cost of patching.
That's interesting. I haven't heard that before as far as using the over-the-air updates for more of these industrial systems. That's an interesting approach. Does that open up some other than security concerns too, making sure your Wi-Fi networks are secure and all of that as well?
Of course, it is. I mean, again, it is a process. So also the auto update needs to be secure in terms of firmware integrity and connection that is encrypted, and all this stuff need to be applied by the vendor, of course.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, one of the things I always like to close up with here, Andrea, is just any trends you might be seeing going forward. This is an interesting vulnerability. Is this something we're going to see more of? Is this just another part of the endpoint security battle that we're constantly fighting? Or are there maybe other big trends that you're seeing that could really impact industrial cybersecurity?
Okay, so I don't want to sound boring, but I still remember the day when I first tried ChatGPT and I was simply shocked. When I copy-pasted a snippet of code coming from one of those open source vulnerable web applications designed for training purposes, and it was able to find the vulnerability inside the provided code, and it was also able to write an exploit for it. So everybody could have done it, everybody, even without very, very little background. Yep. So in my opinion, given this extremely low barrier, we will see more and more AI-generated malware in the coming months. And what is worse, what is my opinion, is that this is going to be AI-generated malware that will exploit 0 days. Because, I mean, if it is that simple to find vulnerabilities, why limit an AI to prepare exploit for known patch vulnerabilities that maybe the target of the criminal has already patched? How about just making it find some unknown vulnerabilities so that we are even sure that our target has not prepared in advance for it? Simultaneously, another trend that I think will happen, and it's a specular one of this, is that there will be a race done by companies to find more and more zero-day vulnerabilities in their own products. Fortunately, to this extent, the AI doesn't work only for criminals; works also for also for the internal security teams. So let's say that I believe in the next months we will see a big boost in terms of CVEs found along.
Two critical vulnerabilities were recently uncovered in Siemens Automation License Manager, a software component that is widely used in industrial control systems and in distributed control systems environments. These vulnerabilities carry the potential for bad actors to gain access to files restricted to high-privilege users. This access would allow the hacker to manipulate files and licenses that would provide privileges, allowing them to control and potentially disrupt operations, steal sensitive data, or launch further attacks from within the network against other systems. Siemens has identified a couple of workarounds, but we're going to talk with someone with a greater understanding of the situation and what it could mean for the industrial sector. It's now my pleasure to welcome Eran Jacob, Head of Research at Israel-based OTORIO, to the show. So first of all, thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate you coming on Security Breach. And I guess we can kind of jump into the reason you're here. Let's talk about some of these vulnerabilities that have been uncovered with Siemens here. Maybe you can just sort of set the situation for us a little bit in terms of what we know at this point.
Sure. So first of all, happy to be here. We are talking about two vulnerabilities that are basically chained together into some interesting flow of exploitation, targeting a component called the Automation License Manager by Siemens. This component, we've actually noticed it while we were researching a distributed control system, the PCS7 by Siemens. And we've noticed this component is installed automatically on all of the servers and even on different solutions, not only the PCS7. So we decided to check it out. And after diving in, we've managed to get remote code execution, kind of a logical flow, leveraging some unexpected behavior of some Win API that were being used. And finally getting a way to just write files directly to any path on the system, move files around, and take files remotely. This was actually pretty severe threat because it was not some kind of memory corruption. It was a pretty logical flaw. So these kind of vulnerabilities are much easier to exploit and much more reliable. And this is why we were urging to make sure clients and users are in general aware and fixing these issues as soon as possible.
Yeah, and Siemens has responded to these vulnerabilities. Their response has essentially been, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but either upgrade or maybe adjust what you're doing. Essentially, they've presented some workarounds. But I'd like to get your take in terms of what their solutions. How impactful are they? Could they have done more? Or does this seem to be the right approach for Siemens, or what's your take there?
So I've been working a lot with Siemens, and they are always very responsive and very quickly handling any kind of security issues. And this was not different. We've got a very responsive team to work with us, and we've collaborated. And even though it was kind of different vulnerabilities, they managed to reproduce it and fix everything pretty quickly. They offered two mitigations. One of them is mentioned in the hardening guide, which is always good to follow and may protect from future vulnerabilities if there are any. And it is to disable the network access to the service. This service is optional. It is for licensing, and the network access to this service is for convenience. So you can set up your licenses remotely from other machine. So in production, during most of the time, you don't need to be enabled, and this is a good mitigation. It is not perfect because it can be still used for privilege escalation and other use cases, but it is very effective. And of course, you can always patch, and it's very important. One thing I think that is missing, and it is kind of wider issue these days, is the fact that this component is kind of SBOM. It is a component installed as part of other software, and I believe many users might not be aware this component is installed on the system and might not follow the right advisories. And advisories for these components are not directing to which components that are usually installed by clients. For example, PCS7 is not referred in the advisory. So it is kind of tricky, and I guess it should be handled such any other SBOM.
Yeah. Is there something that we can learn there from this situation? Is there something we can learn either in terms of educating ourselves when these vulnerabilities arise so we can respond to them more quickly? Are there best practices that you might offer in terms of increasing that awareness and responding as quickly as possible, I guess?
Sure. Yeah, we have been talking about DCS, distributed control system security, for a while now. And one thing that users can do, and it's very effective and almost nobody does, is fully following the vendors' security guides for these systems. Basically, these guides are not part of the deployment guide, but they are expected to be implemented directly after it. So the system is working, and now you are expected to walk through a very long and sometimes complex guide in order to secure a system. And every time there is a new guide, you should look for what's different. But at the end, these guides are reducing risks significantly. Siemens recommends on this guide, even before, to remove this connectivity if possible on some systems. And we just don't see enough users to follow this, maybe because it's very complex. We've tried to release hardening tools, automated one, open source, for some systems, but still users should do their best to make this kind of project of enhancing the security, at least according to the vendor guides.
Absolutely. Previously you mentioned patches as well as a potential solution. When we look at industrial control systems, that's hard because we got to shut stuff down in order to implement those patches. What's your take there? What advice would you give to others in the industrial sector, especially manufacturers, who are confronted with that situation where they want to address these vulnerabilities, but downtime is really hard to manage, especially right now?
So the big word in OT security is segmentation. And it is the right solution for immediate remediation, especially for non-critical services such as this one. And I'd suggest first to understand which connectivity is a must, disable this connectivity, and only when you have the option during some maintenance time to patch the vulnerabilities. Many times you can take a look at some kind of vulnerability management and see that you have some 100 vulnerabilities in the network, but if you inspect closely, if you have proper segmentation, maybe none of them is even accessible from a realistic attack scenario. So first, segmentation. Second, verifying for the specific attack scenarios in your environment, which vulnerabilities are really a threat and really can be exploitable. I think we have some new scoring systems such as EPSS that can assist with that also. But in general, first segmentation, afterwards, if you have the maintenance time.
And have we seen any specific exploits, anybody taking advantage of these vulnerabilities specifically? Any successful hacks as a result?
So we meant to demo this as a possible attack scenario, but I haven't received any update from Siemens regarding in the wild exploitation, but we might not be aware of this because it's common on some use cases today to have information about these kind of attacks, but in OT, on many cases, we don't have the internet connectivity for getting the metadata from the system to detect exploitation. So we might not have an idea about exploitation of this vulnerability in the wild, even if it would happen. I hope it is not exploited in the wild, but we probably won't know if it is.
Interesting. Gets back to that key issue of visibility and understanding networks and what's going on within them, which continues to be a challenge throughout the industrial sector. One of the things that we're seeing too, Eran, is this huge uptick in attacks on industrial control systems. Right now, we're talking about some key vulnerabilities. Just kind of like to get your opinion. Are these conversations more positive because we are seeing things more quickly and discussing them and presenting solutions? Or is there also some negativity tied to this because we're basically promoting a potential avenue of approach for the bad guys? Is it sort of a counterbalance situation, or is there more good in one of those instances than the other?
So it's really a good question. And I think when discussing vulnerabilities, publishing vulnerabilities and discussing the details of them, it's even a bigger question. And the answer is yes, it's good. And it's good because when you look at networks that does not aware about any security issue, they're very much back in security terms. It is not surprising to see Configure or some very old viruses traveling around in OT systems. And we must raise this level of awareness within the OT network for security. And I think that OT also has the privilege to limit more than in IT. So working properly, setting up the environment according to practices, and doing some assessments and following specific steps, we can reduce most of the risk. And this won't be done without this awareness. So we are giving the option to the user to prevent this instead of hoping for good.
Absolutely. Early on, you were talking a lot about segmentation as well. It's something we've talked about on Security Breach quite a bit. I wonder if you could offer some advice there, because I think sometimes when we look at these vast industrial networks, it can be very daunting to try to even just start the process. If you're going to give some advice to somebody who's looking to introduce that segmentation strategy, what would be your advice in terms of where to start, or some key elements to make sure you have, or you're looking at or get involved in the process?
First of all, it depends on the resources you have. If I would suggest one guy in his network to find some first steps to reduce risk, I'd first suggest to, if you have firewalls, check out the policy. I think just inspecting firewall policy for not too long, you notice that there are many bad practices and firewall rules that are allowing traffic from places that should not allow. And if you know your network, usually just inspecting your firewalls once, you introduce a lot of misconfigurations and risks. And after you've done some review for your firewall rules, I think segmentation should be very strict in OT areas. We should not allow anything that is not a must. And we see many times some connectivity that is just more convenient to allow everything from one cell to another cell. And it is keep raising as an issue in different environments, especially when cells can be on remote sites. So I think just keeping it to the minimal required, as always, is the best approach. More than this, it really depends on the environment and requirement and threat.
Thank you for joining us today. And to catch up on past episodes, you can go to manufacturing.net, IEN.com, or mbtmag.com. You can also check Security Breach out wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple, Amazon, and Overcast. And if you have a cybersecurity story or topic that you'd like to have us explore on Security Breach, you can reach me at jeff@IEN.com. For Andrea Palanca and Eran Jacob, I'm Jeff Ranke, and this is Security Breach.